obviously, Samuel, Fulham took the lead in the first half. I think it was the 17th minute or so through Tete, free header at that corner. And it could have been two, if not for David De Gea. Obviously, Casemiro gave away the penalty, didn't he? A bit of a clumsy challenge, and De Gea actually saves a penalty. Could you believe it? Could you believe what you're watching? David De Gea, for the first time since October 2014, saves a penalty. So, were you shocked?
At Old Trafford, yeah, it was as you say, since that was the first in nearly 9 years at Old Trafford. I couldn't believe it, and then Match of the Day did somewhat disparage it when I think the commentator said that's now Mitrovic's fourth missed penalty of the season. So even when De Gea makes a save from a penalty, it's against a guy who, unbeknownst to me anyway at the time, has seemingly a dreadful penalty record. And I'm pretty sure Mitrovic might have missed against Scotland when it was the Euros playoff back in 2020. That might have been the decisive penalty kick. In fact, I mean, you obviously watched him for Newcastle. I'm not sure if he had many penalties to take up there, but he's clearly not got a particularly good record. But nevertheless, it still had to be saved. De Gea went the right way, and there was a louder roar than you'd normally get, I think, for penalty saves, especially in a rather mundane game with little riding on it. And I think that was partly because the crowd couldn't quite believe De Gea had made that save. So it's interesting timing as well ahead of a final where, if it does go to penalties, and given De Gea's record, ordinarily you'd have been wondering, it's depending on who the substitute keeper is, would Ten Hag actually take De Gea off and put a keeper on who may actually be more entrusted with in a penalty shootout environment. But I think given that he's made that save yesterday, it feels like that would be a stretch now if it was to get to it. But again, I think anyone who saw the penalty shootout in the Championship playoff final on Saturday, it does feel like the standard of penalty shootouts is at an all-time high at the moment. It seems very, very rare that a shootout doesn't go into sudden death.
Booted the ball in the Stretford end, didn't he, in celebration, and after the full-time whistle he was obviously presented with his Golden Glove Award. It's probably been a bit of a strange season for De Gea, Samuel. I mean, he's come out at the end of it with the most clean sheets in the Premier League, more than Alisson, more than Edison, more than Nick Pope, who are the top goalkeepers at the moment at the top of the table. And yet there's obviously scrutiny around his position as number one, with some mistakes against Sevilla or against West Ham, and we've talked about it at length on this podcast about how limited he is with the ball at his feet and his distribution. If that was going to be a send-off, it would be perfect, wouldn't it? But the chances are, obviously he's out of contract next month, but we're expecting a new deal for David De Gea.
Yeah, those are all the noises coming out from United, be it off the record or on the record. Ten Hag has spoken about De Gea's situation a few times in the last few weeks, and it's not a particularly stirring topic because, as I said, everyone expects him to sign a renewal, but when you're approaching the final month of your contract, there's always going to be an outside chance. Is this a send-off? Is this his last game at Old Trafford for United? He didn't conduct himself in a manner that suggested that was the case. I'm sure some people would have initially read too much into the fact that he was carrying his daughter out for the pre-match anthem, but that there were quite a few players last week who had their kids as mascots for the Chelsea game. I think Casemiro had both his children with him, and I think Rafael Varane might have had his son with him, and yesterday Harry Maguire had his nephew and one of his daughters. He was holding their hands as he walked out. So that happens quite a lot, certainly towards the end of the season with players, whether they're leaving or not. And the assumption is still that he will be at United next season, De Gea. And I completely agree, it has been a peculiar season. I don't think anybody will be nominating him, to be in the team of the season either. He has had a few games where he's been in match-winning form for United. West Ham in the league and in the FA Cup, they spring to mind. Leicester at home as well, when he made two terrific stops from, I think it was Harvey Barnes and Kelechi Iheanacho, and they might have both been at 0-0 in a half where United were dreadful and somehow 1-0 up at half-time, and then the second half they were pretty clinical and won quite well. But for every one of those saves, there's the Brentford howler, there's the West Ham howler, there's the Sevilla howler, and beyond those mistakes, he's, as you said, his limitations have been exposed on quite a number of occasions this season. It was amusing even yesterday that they had a free kick United inside their own third by the touchline, and Lindelof was hanging back as if to say, pass me the ball and we can play out from the back, and De Gea was almost getting annoyed with him saying, get up there, I'm punting this. So there was definitely some things with De Gea that will not change for the worse, but there are other things that might not change for the better, and there have still been some games this season where he's rolled back the years with the saves that he's made.
If I had to force you to give him a rating out of 10, Samuel, for this season, what would you give him? I'll give you a second to think, because Maguire came out in his interview with MUTV, he said, quote unquote, he had an amazing season. And then obviously Roy Keane was in the Sky studio and he was saying, look, get rid of De Gea. I'd be more in the Keane camp, and as you've just said, he still remains a very good shot stopper. He's still a very decent shot stopper, and we've saw that time and time again, but his all-round game is just not evolved with what the demands of a goalkeeper in 2023, and that's for me why this season probably should be his last, but it isn't, as we just discussed.